Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to play both our Daybreak News opening sequence and the BBC opening sequence, and I'm going to compare them both at the end. Okay, so one big difference that I've noticed is that our Daybreak News opening sequence was only 19 seconds long, whereas the BBC opening sequence was 1 minute and 5 seconds long. This shows how we've adapted our opening sequence in order for it to suit our news package, since as a whole, our news package was shorter than a BBC news package would be. Um, a similarity that I noticed between both is that in both the music was in sync with what was happening on the screen. For example, over here you can see that the reporter flinches because of something that happens in the place where he is, and at the same time the beat also drops, so it's all in sync. Fortunately, you can't hear music, but the beat does drop at that moment, and it just shows how everything's in sync. Similarly, in our news package, in our opening sequence, you can see how the books are being dropped on the table right as the beat also drops in our opening sequence. And just throughout the whole opening sequence in both, everything is happening in sync with the music. So every time the beat drops, either the shot changes to a different shot or it switches to a different camera angle. In our opening sequence, the music as well as the footage, the video fades in together, whereas in the opening sequence for the BBC News, it's all just it all just comes in so suddenly. It doesn't fade in. It's not, yeah. Um, this shows that we've adapted ours to make it all run smoothly. Um, in our opening sequence throughout it, you could see different school related things such as books, whiteboards, and classrooms. And this all suits the topic of our whole news package, since our news package is all about private and state schools. Similarly, BBC News is all about news around the whole world, which makes sense for it to have news reporters all around the world. Um, Another thing about the music is that in both our opening sequence and in the BBC News opening sequence, the music is both upbeat and loud. It's also very repetitive, which makes it recognizable, and it will be easy for the audience to remember and recognize. In the BBC News opening sequence, you can see this red line going through the whole opening sequence, arriving at different locations, different countries. This shows that BBC News is all about the world and different countries and news related to different countries. In our opening sequence, we don't have anything like that. However, we do have this screen with shots of different schools, which can give the audience an idea of what our news package is about. In the BBC News opening sequence, they have their BBC News logo in the bottom corner, and they also have a timer. We don't have a logo going through the whole opening sequence in the bottom corner. However, we do have it coming in at the end. We also don't have a timer at the bottom, since we didn't find it fitting, as our opening sequence is only 19 seconds long, whereas the BBC News opening sequence is just above a minute long, which made sense for it to have the timer counting down. At the end of both our opening sequences, you can see some sort of transition for it to stop at a recognizable logo for both news channels. So yeah, that's how we've adapted from the BBC News opening sequence to create our own opening sequence. In some aspects, they were both very similar. However, our opening sequence was about schools, and the BBC News opening sequence is about the whole world. Therefore, it couldn't both be identical. So we've adapted to some things, and we've used some things from the BBC News opening sequence to create our own.